These three people are very successful and run very large organizations. About 99% of the managers in the world are running small firms, very small firms, and a country, a successful country, is a country that the firms in these countries are doing very well. Most of them are small, but some of them are huge. There is no question we need huge firms, and they probably are the engine. But at the same time, coming back, when I see students come to our school and try to get some skills and other things, there is no question there are some things are in common for all managers. A very good CEO is always important, but a teamwork, top management team working together very well is very important. It doesn't make any difference if you run very large firms in high tech or biotechnology or something like this, or in your organization. But also 15 people running a particular firm is also very important. The top management team will work very well together. Taking care of all stakeholders is very important. You have to take care of your workers, employees, suppliers, and regulators, all of them together. I think we get into a world in which you have to look at all stakeholders, not just the value of the team, the value of the firm in the stock market. If you look at the US, for example, around 4,000 firms are registered in the stock market, and the number of firms in the US is much larger than that. Most firms, and some of the largest ones, are not in the stock market. Nevertheless, so just looking at the stock value of a firm is not the only thing which is important. Taking care of all stakeholders is important. And another thing which I think is very important, we are moving into a world in which the 9 to 5 people will be over. If it's not over now, it will be over tomorrow. 20 years ago, you finished in Israel. You finished the army, you did something, and then you get into a firm, and 40 years later, you retire from the same firm. That's over. Now you go into a firm, everybody is manager. In my faculty, there are about, I don't know, about 70 or 80 people who are working in administration. When we sit together and ask people to identify their positions in my firm, in the business school, it's a large business school, everybody is a manager. That's what I discovered. That's how they define themselves, which makes sense to me, by the way. But today, you are a manager in a firm. 3 years later, you are a manager in another part of the firm. 3 years later, you are a member of another firm. And every 10 years or so, you change your profession. Because whatever your profession is today, most probably 10 years from now, your profession is obsolete. And your technology does not exist anymore. So you have to change work. So we have to, I think that when we train people to be managers, they have to understand that this is the world in which we are, and they have to be what I would like to call the versatile manager. Speak a language or two in addition to your own language, understand how to approach different cultures. Judith was talking about it, you were talking about it. And I think you have to be versatile. You have to be able to adapt, to change all the time, move. You are an engineer today, tomorrow you have a bakery. You can make millions in bakery if you do it right. So I think that's where we are going right now. And most managers will always manage relatively small firms. Thank you.
You know, I think you've hit on something very important, which is tomorrow's management. I don't even like to think of it as management. I think we've got to be leading our organizations, leading our teams. You know, management to me and to many implies a hierarchy that I think Pat said is dead. That it's a matter of aligning different skill sets so that each of the men and women in your team can play to their strengths and have sort of a free rein to succeed on their own, but recognizing that they're part of a team. And the leaders of tomorrow will have multiple different stakeholders they're responsible to. It's, yes, the share owners, of course, whether it's a private company or a listed company. It's very, very much about the employees and making sure that you are responsible to them, not just dictating to them. It's very much the regulators. You've hit on something that I think is something that the leaders of tomorrow are going to have to be much more attuned to, because the regulatory environment is going to get much more complicated, not less complicated. And sadly, even though the global economy is getting more connected, I think in many ways the regulatory environment remains country specific, and so you're getting some inconsistencies building across the globe. And then I think increasingly, beyond share owners and employees and regulators, there is a view that companies and their leaders have a public mandate that goes beyond the other three into the broad area of social responsibility. What does the organization stand for? What do you want to do for society? How do you give back to the communities in which you live? I think all these things tie right into, Pat, what you said at the outset.
Maybe just to bring together a few comments, and I say it from the perspective of my organization, the World Economic Forum, which focuses very extensively on stakeholder management in the very broad sense. And what we would say is that there's a trend going on not only with respect to regulatory and other environments, but that we see as the command and control mode of management is changing, every employee suddenly communicates. Every employee suddenly has the ability to dramatically impact the future of the firm. If you think of banks, one trader can actually make the difference. If you think of a consumer company, one person on the front line makes a huge difference in terms of how they respond to particular challenges on the front line. Or we think of a professional services firm, every partner in some sense has that ability to, at the extreme, make or break the firm in extreme situations. So I think that part of what we're seeing is not only the ability of every employee to work in this new era of vision and culture, but every employee can have a much greater impact. And harnessing those employees can be very different. And I think it's a little bit in that spirit. I posed the question in particular to the two members in the panel from Israel. You spoke earlier about the fact there were only 2 degrees of separation between many people here, and the fact there was a very shared bond and culture. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's been a very innovative, successful country in the high tech and other areas. But we've also heard from others that it's a very globally diverse environment today, and that one has to think about how one operates on a global scale. So I guess my question is, as we think about the culture and the background and the mode of operating in this country, it's been a tremendous strength. There's elements that are tremendous strengths, but there's elements that may make it more difficult to thrive in this global arena. So I'm curious which way you think that will play. Do we need to see over time a harnessing of a different culture? Do we need to have the culture be even deeper? How does today's culture really help or hinder employees thriving in what may be a more global environment?
Start? Okay. A couple of our professors are working on biculture or multicultural environment. First of all, Israel is an island, and we have no choice. We have to be global, so we just have no choice. Now, different cultures means there are barriers among the different firms, and you have to somehow break these barriers. What we do, and we send as many of our students as possible to meet students or managers or firms outside Israel. In my opinion, at least, and I base my opinion on some experience and personal experience, and there is a vast literature about it. There is a huge academic literature about culture, about environment, about this kind of issues. And if you read this literature, you can distill it and come up with a couple of solutions. You cannot read and learn about culture from books. You have to be there, you have to meet the people, you have to sense what they do, you have to connect to them, and connect different cultures is very difficult. Everyone in Israel who is dealing with the Far East, with China, India, Japan, knows it's very difficult to connect to them. However, there is a huge potential in this country. In these countries, everyone knows it for a long time. So the way to do it is, actually, in my opinion, in Israel, there is no other way, is meet them, invite them, go there, try to do things together by itself. Don't push, don't rush. And I think that's what we try to do, and we try to do it by connecting people. We have a very large number of visitors in our school. We have Chinese people coming, Chinese managers, mostly executives, comes every week to Tel Aviv University, and I'm sure it's true with other universities. By the hundreds. We teach them, we go and study from them, our students meet together with their students. Our students, most of them are managers already. And I think that's a way to bridge the gap, and for us in Israel, it's a must, because we have a small market, and we have to break our own country line, sell to others, buy from others, and that's the only way for us to do very well.
So I'll take a little bit different angle to this issue of going global. Aside the issue of the culture issue, there's, at least in my field, two major obstacles that we have to tackle each time we try to go to those exotic countries which could have been excellent customers of our products. One of them is the challenge of intellectual property. And I'm approaching you because you are with the world, and so maybe you can help us. The thing is that when we are so inventive in Israel, we need some kind of period of exclusivity. And it's very difficult to get it around the world. As you know, there are different systems of intellectual property in different countries. And even if they exist, there is not effectiveness. Nobody affects them so seriously. So each time when we invent something, we have to consider whether it is worth to bring the product to one place, or would it be just simply copied later. And I think that that's another challenge that will help the entire Israeli community, which is so inventive, to make sure that its inventions are somehow respected and kept when you go global. So it's not only the matter of bringing your culture, but bringing your knowledge and protecting it. And another thing that is, a real challenge for industry like us that invents things is the issue of regulation, okay? It was mentioned, and usually when people mention in Israel regulation, it goes with communication and it has some kind of so-and-so connotation, positive and negative. Now, in my field, which is medical health, there is no difference around the world between patients and the solutions that they need. So if I could convey this message from Israel and from Jerusalem, we want to bring health to the world. So it's not only the issue of our culture. We can invent in Jerusalem whatever we want. As long as there is some good regulation that once you bring the product and you have to do some kind of trials with it, please remember all human beings are just the same. Most people, sometimes I know. But having the heart is just the same in different places. So I want to convey that even if we are in Israel so inventive and we want to bring things to the world, there are some kind of authorities that we have to deal with, not only culture.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on a little bit of the global aspect. About 10 years ago, I was speaking at a UN-sponsored forum in Kyoto, right, and largely a Japanese audience. And as I was preparing for this, I got some statistics together that basically showed that Japan, of all the Asian cultures, had the least amount of language and training and degrees granted outside of Japan of any of the Asian cultures. Right, which to me was rather spectacular, right? And I think the unanimity of the Japanese culture actually led to its early success in the post-World War II period, and I believe that a great deal of its failure now as an economy is its insularness and its disconnectedness from the rest of the world in language, training, et cetera. And I think if we fast forward to today in Israel, I think part of the reason that Israel is successful is it has clearly a culture that is unified between it, right, but it is also highly connected on a global sense. And, Israel itself is, right, Germans, it's Russians, it's US, it is a very global, right, a community, right, it's educated extremely globally, and it's connected very globally as well. And if, in fact, Israel would become ever insular, right, focusing on your own local businesses and own local economies, I would predict that your demise is probably within the next decade, right, as being that center of innovation for the world. In the internet environment, where we're now reaching approximately half of the human population being connected on the internet, in our lifetimes, right, we'll see that probably at 75 to 80% of all humanity connected on the internet, right? The only market is a global market. The only competitors are global competitors, right? And the only opportunity for innovation is based on a global set of technology and industry understanding. So anything but that, right, I think, leads you to a very insular, narrow island, right, in a very rapidly advancing world.
Yeah, if I could add something, we've talked about the depth and the richness of the Israeli culture. And one of the things that I've experienced is you can never try to break a local culture, nor should you. But we, as I said at the outset, we have people in 140 different countries. Each one of them, has grown up in a different culture, and in many cases, within a country, there might be dozens of different cultures. What's important in bringing a global organization together is to actually have a firm-wide culture that is supplementary to the local culture that everyone's living in. In our case, we build this Ernst & Young culture based upon a set of values that everybody around the world subscribes to, a global code of conduct. And one of the things, frankly, I think my most important responsibility is to actually help make all of our people understand that culture is real. And so if you have my name card, it has an office in London on one side and New York on the other. 75% of the nights every year, I'm in neither of those cities. I'm somewhere traveling, seeing our people, seeing our clients, seeing our regulators. But the most important element sometimes is seeing our people. Because you can't get a culture, despite half the world and more being connected by email, you can't get a culture by sending out an email saying this is going to be our culture. It has to be somewhat eyeball to eyeball, not just from me, but from a variety of our leaders living our values every day. One of the things that I think is going to be, again, more advanced and different for future leaders and managers is you are always, always on. Something that social media is sort of going to just put a fear in all of us is everything is 24/7, and if our people see either myself or any of our partners not living our values, guess what? It doesn't just impact them. They're online right now telling the rest of the firm that this is what's happening, and so there's visibility instantly inside and outside when you're not living the values. And so I think it's critically important that we all think about how social media, which were the first two letters of this new word you've taught us, are going to be impacting us.
Well, in some ways, it's very interesting to think about Israel as one of the early examples of a social enterprise, the sense of social media. Because as a country, all of the immigrants that came from around the world kept ties to their home countries. And they're not just religious, they're cultural, they're very broad. And so this notion of being a part of an extended family, whether you're in Israel or outside, I think is actually one of the core strengths that has been brought to many of these startups, which leads to the statistics all of you know well of NASDAQ listings and of serving foreign markets and the like. And I think one of the things that this country can almost uniquely bring is that ability to operate in a global network that is real time, that is global, that draws on an incredible amount of talent, because it's very typical for people to say, yes, they have that cousin in Canada or relative in Germany, whatever it might be. That's part of the social fabric here. And I think it was a way of behaving even before we had the rest of the world linked via new social media. And so it doesn't surprise me in some sense that there's a unique positioning, and it doesn't surprise me that there may be unique opportunities for this country to position itself as a hub in that environment. Well, we're about halfway through our time here, and the thought was that we could open it up to some questions from the audience. So I'm hoping that some of you, and if interested, can come up to the microphone over here and pose a question to our panel. If you could, I think there's someone who can hand around a microphone, or is it easier for people to step in front? There's a microphone coming right over here in the second row. And if I could ask each of you to introduce yourselves, to share the organization you represent, and you're welcome to direct the question if you prefer, or just open it to the panel as a whole.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for your insights, for being here. I grew up in New York. I'm here representing Masaf, which helps Americans and people of other nationalities come to Israel, work here, learn the language, integrate. My question for each of you, whoever wants to answer, is one that's always very tough for me to answer. And that is, this is the panel on management. What has been your biggest mistake as a manager, or biggest disappointment? And what can we learn from
I guess I'll go first. I'm not sure I like sitting next to the moderator, particularly when we're handing down the microphones. Look, I think when I look back on my career, and I've been the leader of Ernst & Young since around 2000, so it's been sort of a tumultuous time for the profession, a very successful time, I'm pleased to say, for Ernst & Young. The mistakes that I look back on that I've made have been more when two things come to mind. One, when I let my own ego get out ahead of my brain. And you know, I won't get into the details of them, and it doesn't happen often. You learn that lesson quickly. But I think for any leader, they have to maintain a sense of humility to continue to earn the respect of large teams of people. We've all seen really smart people who wear it on their sleeve that it's all about them. And, you know, in our organization, nothing will get someone exited from Ernst & Young faster than not being part of the team. I'm not suggesting I was anywhere close to that level of ego, but there are times when I should have thought carefully about something. The other thing that I would say is if a decision is being made and my instincts after, you know, many times of thinking through this have been sort of opposite to the direction that we end up going, a couple occasions I wish I would have stuck with my instincts instead of sort of letting the herd follow where it was going.